Hello, we are with Carolyn Grossman today, and she holds a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in urban planning. She is currently the Director of Economic Development and Regional Planning at the New York City Department of City Planning. So thank you so much for coming today and to having this conversation with us.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm so happy to be here. It's so exciting to get to learn a new city, and it's a very humbling experience to feel like my experience is interesting to all of the planners in Santiago. So I really am looking forward to our exchange.
So Carolyn, we have questions regarding your interest in going into planning and city planning, regarding your degree in political science. This is not very common in Chile, and I would like to know what got you into city and development. So please.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. It's a great question because in the United States, it's very usual that people don't even know that urban planning is a degree and a profession that you can practice. I can tell you so many of my colleagues at the Department of City Planning have a story about when they discovered that urban planning was in fact something that you could do for a job, and it was certainly that way for me. But I'll start the story to say that my love is really, of cities and of New York City in particular. I grew up in New York City. It's where my father is from. My mother is from Boston, just to the north. And so I grew up loving cities and being interested in the built environment and what made our city such a great place. When I went to my undergraduate degree, I thought that I would be involved in government. So political science, I thought maybe I would work for, a senator or different politicians and bureaucracy. When I was there, I learned about people like Jane Jacobs, right? And these great American urban thinkers who told us that loving cities was actually a study, all right, and a science in a certain way, right, and a profession, something that really could be perfected over time. When I graduated, I came back to New York City and I was working in politics, and it was an incredible time in urban planning in New York City. It was during the administration of our mayor, Michael Bloomberg, who really changed a lot of the ways that we think about urban development in New York City, particularly under Planning Commissioner Amanda Burden, who was thinking about the resurgence of the city, the transformation into a 21st century city, but also really thinking about place and how we make great public places and use that to leverage, make great neighborhoods and make a great city out of that. I became aware of all of that happening and all of the transformation and emphasis on urban redevelopment, and I quit my job and said, oh, I've got to go work here. And I was really fortunate at that time to find a position in sort of a more political position within city government, within city planning. I spent many years on the more political side, really working with our city council and engagement, until I finally said, I really am an urban planner and want to go back and train to do that. And so I went back to a design school and learned a lot more of the architectural and urban design skills, as well as many of the quantitative and data skills that really, I think, support, that sort of mix that we use every day, I think, in our jobs. It's a mix of data and research, but also understanding design and cities and what makes them tick, and also engagement and soft skills. And so I feel very fortunate that I found my way there. And it's a very familiar story, I think. As I said, a lot of people find their way into the profession from different places, from political science, but also from architecture, from engineering, and even from literature, right? We have a lot of ways into careers in urban planning, and also we're very lucky because of the size of New York City that there are a lot of different kinds of urban planning professions, right? That some more focus on engagement, some more focused on data, some more focused on architecture and urban design. So, in my department, which I think we have about 350 people, we have a wide range of different kinds of experts all contributing to the same goal of making the city better.
So regarding that, because you got in love with the city at the end, no? How do you feel, or what are the challenges that you see we face to achieve balanced economic development in the cities? Because that means not only design, planning, but also governance and also politics. So what are the challenges that we face today?
Well, so many, right? When I was started, I mentioned Jane Jacobs, and I imagine Jane Jacobs is also a hero here, right? So Jane Jacobs, of course, teaches us about that ecosystem of living and working and playing in a given space, right? That idea of mixture, right? That all of these things happen in balance and in conjunction with one another. But that was a very radical idea, and it's still, I think, a very radical idea in planning, that what we actually want to see is all of these things mixed in together. So one of the things I think that makes it so challenging is our own rules and our own histories work against that idea of balance, right? I know certainly in New York City, our zoning code, right, which is still in place today, was written in 1961 at a time where the idea was, our jobs go over here and our housing goes over here and our industry goes over here. And, they were intentionally disconnected from one another. So we are still in the process, I think, of rewriting that DNA and trying to, over time, make for cities that work better functionally and really do create that mixture that I think people intuitively want from our cities. Of course, as you say, governance, a huge challenge. Within New York City, we are fortunate that we have a very large city with a lot of different conditions, all controlled by a single government, and a fairly strong mayoral system that allows us to plan in a somewhat unified way. But we'll talk over the whole week about, at the metropolitan scale, we don't have that same sense of unified governance. And so I suspect we share many of the same challenges of trying to coordinate a balance of growth across many levels of government where the decision making is spread, right? Where we make very localized decisions about how we want to grow and what we want to see, but more global decisions about where we invest infrastructure, how it all fits together. So we have many of the same challenges.
Yeah, so connection, the balance between the different areas, zoning, governance, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And what do you think are the topics that we need to understand, or things that we need to study that we don't know already, or things that we need to put a focus on to learn and to understand these challenges? So what do we need to learn to understand?
Well, I think so, at a more, the most basic topical rudimentary level, we think about housing, where people live, jobs, where people work, how they are interconnected to one another, and the environment that supports us all, right? So, we certainly, there are basic metrics that we're looking at, certainly in New York City, where housing affordability is one of our greatest challenges. We're constantly looking at the supply of housing and who's producing it and where is it being produced and how is it, how much is being produced relative to our economic growth, right? So we have basic metrics that we are able to, to look at to get that sense of what do we even mean by balance. Now, of course, the quality of data is always a real challenge, right? And we are fortunate inside of New York City. We've invested over many decades in really good administrative data that tells us things like how much housing are we building? Is it affordable? Where is it being built? What kind of housing is being built, right? When we start to get outside of our borders of the city, we don't even necessarily have that quality of quantitative data, right? So the things that we need to be looking at always are a question of what can we even achieve good information about, and what sourcing can we generate there. But of course, we also think a lot about not just the quantitative data, but what story are we telling and how do we actually understand where those challenges are? I think increasingly we're very focused on engagement. as a practice in our urban planning, and making sure that we are not just producing numbers and looking at sort of balance in a sort of academic sense, but how are we actually helping different neighborhoods, right? How do we understand, this neighborhood, well, you've actually not produced enough housing here, and look at what that's doing. Look at how your children aren't able to stay in a neighborhood. Like, let us show you how the rental prices have been affected. Let us show you how other neighborhoods have been finding ways to achieve that affordability through, different kinds of housing programs. So, we're always looking at that combination of what kind of, what is our policy objective? What information do we have to bear? How good is it? What story can we tell? And is it useful to anyone?
Yeah, so it's not only information, but how to use it, and also how people is living in the cities, how they use the cities, because sometimes you have the information and maybe the way the policies organize the city is different to what the numbers are saying. And I would like to know, in your experience in the New York City Planning Department, do you have some examples of projects with innovative approaches to balance economic development?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about one of our major projects right now, which is called the City of Yes. So coming out of the COVID pandemic, New York City, like many cities, I think, faced a lot of challenges. Our economy wasn't as strong. We saw a lot of stores closing, but we also have a lot of chronic challenges. As I say, housing affordability, different neighborhoods not doing as well. So, and also, I think conservatism is itself a challenge in the service of protecting quality of life. We have really continued to not change a lot of our zoning and our regulations that go back to 1960s, which are inadvertently, I think, holding us back from being the kind of city that we want to be. So coming into this mayoral administration, and with our current planning commissioner, we announced a program called the City of Yes, which is it's the largest zoning changes since the 1960s. It's really ultimately in three parts, almost an entire rewriting of our zoning code, and so almost all of our regulations that control development in the city. City of Yes for carbon neutrality is really about making sure that we are building to 21st century sustainability standards, and that we are incorporating all of the kinds of things that make our buildings better, from solar panels and allowing for better sustainable building envelopes, to micromobility, allowing for people to have bicycles and electric vehicles in their buildings. City of Yes for economic opportunity is about creating economic activity all across New York City, not just in Manhattan, which I think is a lot of what people think of when they think of New York City. The Empire State Building, our tall skyscraper districts, incredibly important to our economy, but not where everyone works, right? We are a 5-borough city, and we have jobs all across the city, and we could have more. So with economic opportunity, we are focused on trying to help more jobs get into more locations, because a lot of our rules are standing in the way of that, right? We find that things that were written into the 1960s that were designed to protect dirty factories from being near homes are in fact stopping our local craftsmen from occupying storefront space, or, things that people like to do, laser tag and pools and like family entertainment. Well, because they didn't exist in the 1960s, we don't have regulations that are allowing them to exist in our commercial areas, right? It hurts our neighborhoods, but it also hurts our ability to have regular kinds of jobs. So we went through our zoning code and found every place that we could identify with our business industries, with our civic groups, with the general public. We went through a 3-year process to take ideas for all of the ways that we could make it easier to do business under a zoning code, and we passed a 1,000-page referendum to improve our commercial regulations. That was adopted just last month, so we're very grateful for that. And the third piece of it, City of Yes for Housing Opportunity is currently in its political process in New York City right now, and that's looking at trying to create a little bit more housing in every neighborhood of the city. What we've found is that over time, New York City is not building enough housing to really keep us affordable. We've been in an affordability crisis for my entire life, and it's really only getting, only gotten worse. And more than that, where we have created new housing, only a very small number of neighborhoods have really been providing all of the new housing for the entire city. So by finding ways to introduce housing everywhere, and that means in our low density areas, we have single family home districts in New York City. We're looking for ways to create an extra unit maybe in the backyard, or have somebody turn an attic or a basement into units in those circumstances, all the way up through our skyscraper districts, and finding ways to create more housing there and more affordable housing in those places. We're really spreading out the benefits and the burdens of a growing city. So all of those together are really thinking about that 21st century city. How do we take advantage of the land that we do have and create more opportunities all across the city?
So it's a more integrated planning at the end. It's trying to connect.
It's certainly the intention. All of these, as we discussed it, I think will be part of the conversation. None of this is easy, right? Our governments are so complex in the ways that we think about where we can grow and how we set that template, and then how do we also make all of the infrastructural investments that are necessary to support that growth, from sewers to roads to schools, all of these, right? So we are still learning. We're a strong city, and I think we have a good planning process, but we're also always still growing and getting better at trying to integrate all of those features together to support better neighborhoods.
Yeah. So I would like to end with this question about the future generations, because they are going to build and design and plan the cities of the future. So what would you recommend to future generations of architects and urban planners? What should they learn, study, observe in order to design more balanced cities?
Oh, God. Well, first, be urban planners, right? And there are so many different ways to help your city be better, right? Whether it's through building buildings, or the urban design, or building housing, or the infrastructure, right? There are all of these different specialities that I think really contribute. And certainly in New York City, we have so many different kinds of positions, more focused on the data, more focused on the design, more focused on a bureaucracy. There's so many different ways to contribute to public service in that way. But when we think about urban planning, I think one way that I really think about what's important that I would share is scale, and thinking about a site, how an individual site is contributing to the city at the scale of urban design, right? Does it have is it active? Do you enjoy walking by a building? What's happening at the ground floor? Is it beautiful? Is it a contributor? What's happening at the neighborhood scale? Is this balanced, right? Is there housing? Is there jobs? Is this an active area? Is this a passive area? Does it have parks? Does it have the infrastructure it needs to survive and thrive? What's happening at the city scale? And then I think increasingly people are really waking up to what's happening at the regional scale, and how we continue to think about, the challenges that don't fit neatly into our political boundaries, whether those are, our ability to house cities, our ability to plan economies that don't function within boundaries, our ability to meet increasing climate changes. Certainly our environment doesn't know political boundaries either. So to always just be thinking from that small scale to what you see in front of you, and you using your intuitions all the way up to understanding those systems, and having those in mind at the same time.
So an understanding of the system of the city.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Thanks, Carolyn, for giving us your time today for the interview, and I hope you enjoy your visit in Santiago.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm so much looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you.